All right, let's get right into it. We usually think of freedom as not needing anyone at all. But what if real power, what if true independence is actually the complete opposite? What if it's all about making other people so dependent on you that they simply can't afford to get rid of you? Let's explore this, the architecture of power.
It all starts with this quote. And honestly, it's one of the most chilling and just plain bizarre lines you'll ever hear from the Middle Ages. So you've got this city, Siena, and it was just saved by a brilliant mercenary soldier. Now they're debating his reward, and their final decision? Let's execute him.
And that's the big question, right? Why on earth would you execute the very person who just saved you? It seems totally insane, a brutal slap in the face. But there's a cold, hard logic at play here. A strategic trap that, frankly, a lot of people fall into without even knowing it.
To really understand why, we need to break down what's called the mercenaries trap. It's this incredible danger you face when you're super useful, but ultimately completely replaceable.
The logic here is just chillingly pragmatic. You see, for the people of Siena, as soon as the war was won, that mercenary hero went from being an asset to a major liability. Think about it. A man strong enough to save your city is also strong enough to take over your city. So by killing him, they got rid of the threat. And by making him a patron saint, well, that's how they paid their debt without giving a living, breathing hero way too much political power. The problem was solved, so the problem solver had to go.
And believe me, this was not a one-time thing. Let me introduce you to the Count of Carmagnola. This is a real historical figure. He was one of the greatest mercenaries of his day, winning all these battles for Venice. But he made a fatal mistake. He just assumed that his past victories made him essential. Venice, they saw it very differently. They saw a powerful guy demanding more and more money who could, easily be replaced by someone younger and cheaper. So they invited him to a fancy banquet, led him to the dungeon, and they beheaded him the next day.
So you see, it's a pattern, right? It's not a fluke. Both the legendary mercenary from Siena and the real-life Count of Carmagnola made the exact same strategic error. They solved the big problem, but they failed to make themselves a permanent, ongoing necessity. They were useful, sure, but they weren't indispensable. And that small difference was fatal.
Okay, so how do you avoid this trap? How do you make that jump from being just useful to being truly necessary? Well, it turns out there are two main strategies, two very different paths to engineering this kind of dependency.
The first path is what we can call intensive power. This is the power of the genius, right? The singular talent, like Michelangelo. His skill was so unique, so irreplaceable, that Pope Julius II literally had to beg him to come back to Rome after they had a falling out. The Pope couldn't just go out and find another Michelangelo. Then there's the second path, extensive power. This is where you don't just have a skill, you become the system itself. Think of someone like Henry Kissinger in the Nixon administration.
So you can really see the key difference here. Michelangelo's power was portable. If the Pope didn't want him, fine. He could pack up his talent and find another patron. His resource was his own incredible skill. Kissinger's power, on the other hand, was completely rooted in the structure of the White House. He got himself involved in so many different departments, foreign policy, national security, intelligence, that getting rid of him would have caused total chaos. His power was huge, but it was tied to that one specific system.
But it gets even more interesting. Beyond just having a skill or a powerful position, there are even more subtle ways to weave this web of dependency, ways that tap directly into human psychology. Okay, check out this story about King Louis XI of France. This guy was nicknamed the Spider King for his love of intrigue and plots. He had this court astrologer whose predictions were just a little too accurate. After the astrologer correctly predicted that a lady in the court would die, Louis got paranoid. Was this guy a killer? Was he just dangerously powerful? He decided the astrologer had to go, and he made a plan to have him thrown from a castle window.
But right at the last second, just before giving the signal, the king asks one final question. Tell me, what will your fate be? And the astrologer's answer? Oh, it's pure genius. He says, I shall die just 3 days before your majesty. In one single sentence, he intertwined their fates. Bam! Suddenly, the king's own survival was tied to keeping the astrologer alive and well. The man went from a liability to a protected asset in an instant.
And here's another key thing to remember. Dependency isn't always a straight line. During the Hollywood blacklist, the studio head Harry Cohn, a fierce anti-communist, was being pressured to fire a writer named John Howard Lawson. But Cohn wouldn't do it. Why? Well, you have to follow the chain. Lawson was Humphrey Bogart's favorite writer. Bogart was the studio's biggest star. So firing Lawson meant risking his relationship with Bogart, which would cost the studio a fortune. Lawson was protected because he was a critical link in a chain of dependency.
Now, right about now, you're probably thinking, okay, I get it. The goal is to become so powerful that I don't need anyone at all, right? Well, be careful, because taking this idea to its extreme reveals a very dangerous reversal.
Let's talk about John D. Rockefeller. By 1880, his company, Standard Oil, controlled an astonishing 90%. That's 90% of all oil refining in the United States. I mean, he had achieved a near total monopoly. The entire country was dependent on him, while he seemed dependent on no one.
But what happens when one person has that much control? People start to push back, hard. Journalists and politicians painted him as a public enemy. His incredible success, his total independence from everyone else, it basically triggered a massive backlash from the entire system. And in 1911, the Supreme Court declared Standard Oil an illegal monopoly and smashed it into 34 separate companies.
And this wasn't an isolated incident either. JP Morgan's financial empire became so powerful that he personally had to bail out the US government. Can you imagine that? And what was the response? Congress basically said never again and created the Federal Reserve, a whole system designed specifically to make sure the government would never ever be that dependent on one man again. Absolute independence invites its own destruction.
So, after all that, what's the takeaway? What does this all really mean? Well, it means we kind of have to flip our whole idea of what it means to be independent and powerful completely on its head.
You see, the real goal isn't total independence. It's something we can call reverse independence. It's this amazing state of freedom you achieve not by needing no one, but when others, your boss, your organization, your clients, become so dependent on you that their need for you becomes your protection. Their dependency is your shield, your leverage, and ultimately, your freedom.
And that leaves us with one final, really important question to ask yourself. In your own career, in your life, are you building a position that's just useful? Are you solving temporary problems like a mercenary, just hoping for gratitude that might never come? Or are you weaving yourself so deeply into the fabric of things that to remove you would be to unravel the whole system? The difference is everything.